Nightline is brought to you by Master Estina and National Australia Bank, looking after your bigger picture.
The Treasurer denies an international gaffe, but Labor wants his scalp. A community grieves for Western Australia's rock collapse victims, and no breakthrough but Israel and the PLO to keep talking.
From National 9 News, this is Nightline with Peter Overton.
Good evening. It's been another difficult day for the Treasurer as his remarks on US interest rates continue to reverberate around global financial markets and through the domestic political scene. Mr Costello has denied revealing details of private discussions in Washington with America's top banking official. But the opposition says he's lying and should resign. Laurie Wilson has our report.
As he left Washington for New York, the Treasurer looked anything but comfortable, denying he'd even commented on interest rates following his meeting with US central banker Alan Greenspan.
No. What you should understand is I'm not making comments on US interest rates, and I'm not quoting them, and any suggestion that I would be is wrong.
But that was clearly at odds with a recording of the Treasurer's media briefing after the meeting with Dr Greenspan.
I don't think there's any expectation at the moment that rates are going to rise.
And Mr Costello only appeared to compound the problem later in New York, when he suggested the views he'd expressed were his own, not Dr Greenspan's.
What transpires between us is for us, and I was reporting my own assessment.
Again, the original briefing clearly suggests otherwise.
He indicated to me that he saw no threats to inflation down the track.
Both the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal reported the remarks, adding to the surge on world markets. At home, opposition leader Kim Beazley accused Mr Costello of damaging the position of trust Australia holds in Washington.
Mr Costello has put it all in jeopardy in one visit.
The opposition leader said he should resign.
I would think that John Howard would be ruminating on Mr Costello's future.
The Prime Minister might well be ruminating on one or two other things as well, like the tax debate and Victorian Premier Jeff Kennett. Mr Kennett has taken another swipe at the federal government, this time over the pace of reform, and he's again urged John Howard to bite the bullet on a consumption tax.
Do the work in the next 2 years and then get on with reform the moment after the next election.
Laurie Wilson reporting for Nightline.
Grain growers have joined National Party leader Tim Fischer in urging the Prime Minister to act over anti-Asian comments by Pauline Hanson. They claim she's damaging trade agreements with our northern neighbours. Clearly, the independent MP isn't out of favour with everyone. Tonight, she's attended a National Party function.
Pauline Hanson was almost off the guest list. The first invitation was withdrawn late yesterday when some feared an embarrassment. It was reissued by the Minister last night. It's the second time this week she's been welcomed into the Nationals fold, only too pleased, it seems, to have her there.
You're friends with Mr Beatties?
Yes, we are. Yeah. We are very good friends. He's a very lovely gentleman.
Welcome in one national stronghold, not so welcome in the bush. Grain growers echo federal leader Tim Fischer's fears of possible Hanson-inspired damage to our Asian trade.
These sorts of sentiments cannot afford to be left unchallenged, and they must be challenged.
It's time, Ian McFarlane says, for all political leaders to show some leadership, to distance themselves from Pauline Hanson before major damage is done.
Well, I'm saying that Tim Fischer is right, and I'm saying that the Prime Minister needs to come out quickly and state Australia's position. I'm astounded at the silence by the Prime Minister.
Lane Kelcutt for Nightline.
A Sydney court's been told a man accused of murdering British tourist Brian Hagland was attracted to violence and would be a danger to the community if released. Aaron Martin was seeking bail amid concerns his trial wouldn't be heard for 18 months. Martin's solicitor claimed it was her client who'd been bashed during the incident. She questioned the victim's character, claiming he was known for picking fights. But the Crown alleges Martin, who'd been out of jail just 18 months, was in Bondi on the night of Brian Hagland's death looking for trouble. A bail decision is expected tomorrow. A Melbourne teenager has been killed while train surfing, bringing to 9 the number of deaths in similar circumstances in as many years. 15-year-old Ned Jenkins suffered massive head injuries when he struck an overhead bridge. As schoolmates left tributes at the scene today, Victoria's Public Transport Corporation said the tragedy was entirely avoidable. In northeastern Victoria, a 50-year-old man and a teenage family friend have been rescued by helicopter after being stranded for 6 days by floods near Wangaratta. The pair had been on a fishing trip but became trapped when the river rose. Flooding in the region has eased and the SES says there are only a few trouble spots left. The community of Gracetown in Western Australia today came together to share their grief in a memorial service for the 9 people killed in last Friday's rock collapse. The 4 children and 5 adults were watching a school surfing competition when they died.
On the cliff above the beach where they lost 9 of their own, the Gracetown community today gathered to grieve.
We share a common belief, the belief that in the midst of this tragedy, our participation here will do some good.
I have never seen a community come together so closely. Their team effort on Friday was just superb, and the support that you have given each other since then is inspiring.
Little Sarah Otto sat in the front row. She was the only survivor, pulled from the tons of landslide that killed her mother.
We can't bring them back, but we can be there. We will never forget this tragedy or tragic loss of life.
4,000 came to mourn, family, friends and those still unbelieving. In a town where the surf is a way of life, 200 board riders held their own tribute.
The 9 very special people on the beach last Friday are free to ride the waves together.
6 days ago, the school group watched a surfing carnival at this spot, but today the surfers just sat and rocked on the swell, trying to understand.
Yes, the schools are left bruised and shocked, but they do have the inner strength and the will to keep going.
The natural beauty of this corner of Australia will always draw people to its shores, but Friday's freak of nature will never be forgotten. Michael Usher for Nightline.
Israeli and Palestinian security forces are preparing for violence after the Washington Peace Summit failed to make any real progress. Palestinians and Israeli soldiers have already clashed in Hebron, while Israelis are planning demonstrations in support of Prime Minister Netanyahu, who gave no concessions apart from agreeing to further talks.
As a beaming President Clinton looked on, the reluctant partners in the peace process engaged in a hearty handshake, a symbolic gesture to mark the change in tone of the Arab-Israeli relationship. Though the summit failed to produce a major breakthrough, the president said it had achieved the goals of getting the leaders to talk again and to work towards peace.
The Israeli and Palestinian people have chosen to strive for cooperation, progress, and hope. Now it falls to their leaders to guide them toward those goals.
The leaders pledged to engage in non-stop talks on the still unresolved issues of the controversial tunnel in East Jerusalem and to set a date for the promised Israeli troop withdrawal from the West Bank town of Hebron.
I know that very bad things didn't happen and something good may have begun, and that is the establishment of greater trust, greater understanding between Chairman Arafat and myself.
But the Palestinians were clearly unhappy with the lack of specific agreements here in Washington.
There were no positive results due to the Israeli position, which had in fact refused to deal seriously with the basic issues.
Despite their complaints, the Palestinians say they will do their best to honor the interim agreement already in place and to work towards peace. The U.S. will also continue to play a role. Special Envoy Dennis Ross will head to the Middle East this weekend in order to keep the talks on track.
After the break, the benefits of aspirin for stroke victims and no stony faces from the Royals over their new images. Customs officers at Brisbane's International Airport have seized more than $1 million worth of ecstasy. The officers, suspicious of a British tourist yesterday, searched his luggage and found the drug hidden in toiletry bottles. It's the third time in less than a month that a British tourist has been arrested at the airport carrying ecstasy. The investigation to trace the source of the drugs has been intensified. Stroke is the third biggest killer in Australia and a major contributor to adult disability. But stroke victims may have a better chance of recovery thanks to one of our most common drugs, aspirin.
Every 15 minutes in Australia, someone suffers a stroke when blood flow to the brain is cut off, usually by a clot.
It's a huge problem. It's the third biggest cause of death in Australia.
Stroke is also our major cause of adult disability, currently affecting 200,000 Australians, and until recently, nothing could reverse its effects. But in a new international trial, 20,000 patients were given a single aspirin within 48 hours of suffering an acute stroke. Results are preliminary, but the aspirin patients have had a better recovery than patients given other medication.
It'd be a very cheap remedy and a very simple one. It'd be widely available throughout the community, and that's why we're excited about the possibility of the trial showing a benefit.
The findings back up recommendations by many doctors that aspirin should be given to people as a preventative measure for stroke and heart attack.
Oh, there's very definite evidence that an aspirin a day keeps the doctor away in terms of stroke, myocardial infarction, and that's in high-risk patients.
But whether it's aspirin or any current stroke treatment, it's best given within 24 hours to really work. And doctors urge patients to get to hospital as quickly as possible to avoid devastating results.
Cheryl Taylor for Nightline.
In Britain, one of the world's most controversial pregnancies has ended tragically. Mandy Allwood, who had been expecting 8 babies, miscarried 3 on Tuesday and has now lost the remaining 5.
Doctors at this London hospital had said they were hoping for a medical miracle, but it was not to be. After Mandy Allwood lost 3 of 8 babies yesterday, the final 5 were stillborn overnight. Mandy Allwood was said to be in a stable condition, but suffering emotionally.
Mandy certainly this afternoon became more and more distraught and disappointed.
This tragic case raises serious ethical questions. Among them, did Mandy Allwood choose to ignore medical advice because a British newspaper paid for her story? The more babies she was expecting, the more sensational their exclusive.
It's hard to know whether, if the spotlight hadn't been on Mandy, whether she would have chosen differently.
While Miss Allwood is recovering in hospital, her publicity agent continues with his controversial role.
Because this has created, as I say, huge media interest worldwide, and there's a lot of people worldwide that want to talk to Mandy.
In London, Mark Ferguson for Nightline.
Mark Furman, the disgraced Los Angeles policeman whose evidence rocked the prosecution case at the O.J. Simpson trial, was back in court today. The detective who was involved in the investigation into the murder of Simpson's wife and her friend Ronald Goldman faced perjury charges. It stemmed from Furman's court claim that he hadn't used the term nigger during the past 10 years. 4 witnesses contradicted his evidence, one revealing tapes with him using the word 41 times. Furman pleaded no contest and was put on 3 years probation. A second young boy has been sent home from a US school after allegations he'd sexually harassed a female student. DeAndre DeRay was suspended for 5 days for kissing a female classmate and reportedly tearing a button off her skirt. School officials later dropped the charges. Just over a week ago, 6-year-old Jonathan Prevett was suspended for kissing a little girl on the cheek. A London church has immortalised the Queen, Prince Charles and Prince William in stone. Their likenesses now adorn the restored spire of St John the Divine. The stonemasons say the traditional Gothic-style gargoyles aren't meant to be irreverent. The Queen helped fund the project, and she and the other members of the royal family are said to be delighted. In a moment, the people whose lives and livelihoods hinge on a Middle East peace deal. The lack of progress at the Washington summit will weigh heavily on those desperate for peace. For many Palestinians, their lives are on hold as negotiations stall. For some Israelis, though, it's not just stone walls and barbed wire that separate them from their Palestinian neighbours, but a deep gulf of suspicion and anger.
While their leaders struggle to settle their differences, they're still burying their dead in Gaza.
Mohammed Shalayel, a 22-year-old Palestinian police officer, clung on to life for 6 days after he was shot in the head during last week's clashes. The dead man's uncle, Khalid Shalayel, a major in the police force, received the mourners in his role as head of the family. Despite the grief in his family, he was aware of the peace talks in Washington today and wished them well. We all want peace, he said. I want no more of this sadness. But if we Palestinians are denied our rights, we will fight. The potential for further violence underlined as the dead man's friends and fellow police officers toured Gaza, threatening revenge on the Israelis and their Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The 960,000 Palestinians who live in Gaza are unable to leave their self-rule enclave to travel or work in Israel. Surrounded by the Israeli army, their skies patrolled by Israeli jets, they claim they live under siege. There is a second community living here in Gaza, and in many ways they too live in a state of permanent siege. Behind their wire and fortifications, the Israeli settlers have been watching the Washington talks, distrusting the motives of everyone, including their own leaders. Today, the settlers were reinforcing their defences, for they live in the very heart of Gaza. Their fences separate two very different worlds. Inside, there are green, well-watered lawns, even a well-stocked shopping centre. There are 20 such Jewish communities inside Gaza. At the Khatif settlement, they were holding a party today to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the building of the first home here. Many of these people believe their own leaders are under pressure from outside Israel to give settlements like their own to the Palestinians, and many say they'd resist. Settlers like Rebecca Savail, who is prepared to bring up a young family in a world of barbed wire and guns, but is not prepared to give up a home she says belongs to the Jewish people.
I would not want to leave here because I was chased out. And when the neighbors around us take out their guns, then I feel like I'm being chased out, and that's the main reason why I would stay here.
Inside the settlements is an experimental Israeli government project successfully growing vegetables on sand. Hanania Schneid was a baby when his parents brought him here. He's about to leave Gaza to serve his time in the Israeli armed forces, but from him a qualified note of optimism.
Obviously it's very bad, but I think it will pass. We get along with the Arabs around here. I think it will pass. People don't know this, but the Arabs around here are mostly against the situation too.
Outside the Jewish settlement, there was a rare view of Arab-Israeli agreement. Joint patrols, Palestinian officers accompanying members of the Israeli security forces, policing Gaza's potential flashpoints, trying to prevent further violence so the leaders can continue talking. Paul Davis reporting for Nightline.
And still to come on Nightline, the finance, weather and in sport, racing, cricket, league test preparations and more celebrations for the AFL champions. To sport now, and in rugby league, Daniel Gartner and Michael Butner will run on in Sunday's league test against Papua New Guinea. On the bench will be another of the new boys, Sydney City's Andrew Walker.
The first full day spreading the league gospel, and around 1,000 youngsters keen to get close to the Australians enjoyed the 50-minute open session, and many left with a reminder.
We've only been here for 2 days and the response we've had is unbelievable.
Yeah, this is a national sport and, you know, I've never seen anything like it before in my life and you know, really enjoying it so far.
Danny Moore and Mark Carroll were in demand at a local radio station, while Jeff Tuvey and Terry Hill were special guests on the local footy show. The skipper vowing not to take the locals lightly. Back home and in the St George heartland, around 5,000 fans flocked to Cogra to cheer the Dragons.
It's great. We didn't win, but it's excellent.
They saluted a year of achievement, reaching the grand final following an off-season in limbo.
Hopefully we'll go one better next year. Thanks for their support during the year.
The Dragons fought off amalgamation. They didn't have a coach, a sponsor, and not enough money to hold on to their stars. After moulding a team rated 100 to 1 into grand finalists, coach David Waite accepted the key to Cogra. For retiring 12-year veteran Ricky Walford, it was a fitting send-off.
Whilst it's sad, at the same time it's enjoyable because
It's terrific to see so many people here supporting us.
Charles Christian for Nightline.
AFL Premiers North Melbourne were the focus of celebrations yet again today. It was Melbourne City Council's turn to praise the grand final winners in what's shaping up as a never-ending post-season party.
With the Premiership Cup never too far from sight, the North Melbourne players gathered for a private get-together before facing the masses. Errol Street was blocked off for the lunchtime party and more than 2,000 supporters were there to make the most of it. This was a day to congratulate not just the senior team, but the North Melbourne reserves who defeated Essendon in their grand final. Lord Mayor Ivan Devison honoured the 40-plus players and coaches. Several, including Dennis Pagan, were given special achievement certificates.
There are a lot of reasons why our guys wanted to be successful this year. One of them is because of the supporters we've got at North Melbourne.
And although Pagan had his own pocket of support among the faithful, the North hero remains skipper Wayne Carey.
You'll ask any player that their, I suppose, biggest hate is fickle supporters, and I can tell you that North Melbourne have none of those, and I'd like to...
Writer's cramp has become a common ailment among the players since the final siren sounded on Saturday afternoon. A seemingly endless line of autograph hunters waited anxiously for a mere stroke of the pen. The players will be together again tomorrow night for the club's Best and Fairest awards. But it wasn't all football celebrations in town today. In Balwyn, many of Collingwood's past premiership players gathered to farewell former teammate Bill Toomey. The former Magpie skipper died on Monday morning, aged 69. Toomey was one of 4 brothers to pull on the famous Collingwood jumper. The youngest, Mick, is now the sole survivor.
To basketball, and the Sydney Kings have gone 1-up in their best-of-3 quarter-final series against Canberra. After a slow start, the Kings completely dominated the Cannons, cruising to a 24-point victory. The biggest events on the horse racing calendar are fast approaching, and the favourite for the Caulfield Cup could well be sorted out this weekend. The Lee Freedman-trained Rose of Portland will be on the track, but will need a top-notch performance to be among the Caulfield starters.
For the Freedman Empire, it's once again a spring promising plenty. Of all their runners on Saturday, most attention will be on Rose of Portland. Punters have already made a favourite for the first leg of the Cup stubble, but because she's earned less prize money than required, she needs to finish in the top 2 in the Turnbull to clinch a spot.
I think she'll run really well. She's, you know, we've lengthened her workout and she's worked really well the last couple of weeks, and but by the same token, it's not going to be an easy field to beat.
But even the task of finishing first or second won't be an easy one. Among her main opposition, stablemates Count Shivers and Doremus. Melbourne Cup winner Doremus will run in the Turnbull, with his performance deciding whether he'll take on the Cup stubble again or go for the Japan Cup.
Decision will be made Sunday.
Leave it up to the owners.
That's it.
A long way from Flemington, but aiming to be there on the first Tuesday in November, English stayer Grey Shot. In idyllic surrounds in Hampshire, leading trainer Ian Balding is planning his assault.
Grey Shot's one of the best stayers in the country at this time.
If you've got a good stayer, you have to think seriously about what's obviously the best staying race in the world.
Due in a fortnight, Grey Shot will be the first of the overseas horses to arrive. Andrew Bansley for Nightline.
In motor racing, Craig Lowndes has clocked the fastest ever qualifying time for the Bathurst 1000. He scorched around Mount Panorama in just over 2 minutes and 10 seconds, leaving Mark Scaife and Glenn Seaton in his wake. Seaton's teammate, though, suffered a setback when co-driver David Parson came unstuck at 240 kilometres an hour. Parsons walked away, as did Terry Finnegan, who crashed on the infamous Dipper. Fast bowler Craig McDermott's injury woes continue. A knee operation will keep him out of the first half of the cricket season, and that means the first 3 tests against the West Indies. In all, the 31-year-old's gone under the knife 14 times for multiple operations on his knees, groin and a hernia, as well as a twisted bowel. It won't be long before the cricket season is at fever pitch, and that's good news for one company that's been letting the grass grow under its feet. It's developed an experimental pitch, which was laid at the Melbourne Cricket Ground today.
For players, the hard work is over once the final siren sounds. But that's a call to action for Northern Victorian turf farm Strathair. Since 1985, the company's products have been used to re-establish the wicket area after the rigours of the football season.
There's only a limited growth time between it going this week each year and the first match.
So the company, in conjunction with the MCC, decided to try a portable pitch, which would have fully developed root systems by the time it reached the ground. They built it last summer and it spent the winter being nurtured in a hothouse. After such a time-consuming project, nerves were tested as each of the 16-tonne halves was lifted onto semi-trailers for transport to Melbourne.
Please don't have an accident on the way down.
The big guns of the cricket world and an outgoing footy chief watched keenly today as the process was reversed. The AFL is especially interested in the project because if the black soil of the entire wicket area is eventually replaced with the sand-based squares used on the outfield, it will eliminate winter's muddy surface.
In finance news, the Australian share market was virtually steady today. In Tokyo, the Nikkei fell 167.1 points. In London tonight, the FT100 is 16.5 points down in morning trading. Gold is fetching 379.7 US an ounce. And in European trading tonight, the Australian dollar is buying 79.03 US cents, 1.21 Deutschmarks, 88 yen and 50p. The national weather. And there's a high off eastern Australia and another approaching the west, followed by a cold front. The forecast, fine for Brisbane and Darwin, fine also for Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne, Hobart and Adelaide. And in Perth, early showers, then fine. And finally tonight, he may be plagued with controversy, but the enthusiasm of Michael Jackson fans won't be dampened. 200,000 tickets for his upcoming Australian shows were snapped up today in near record time. Many devotees camped out last night to ensure they get to see their idol. More concerts have already been scheduled. I'm Peter Overton. Good night.